Hello and welcome to the Twist Future of Work series, part one. I'm Chase Warrington, the head of remote here at Doist, and I've got a good friend of mine, Rhys Black from Oyster, joining us for the first episode in the Twist Future of Work series. How's it going, Rhys?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to partner with Oyster on this, dive into the future of work generally, which we obviously both love, both work in. But the focus of this particular episode, as you know, is really about diving into human resources, HR for short, of course, that and how that's changed as a function of remote work, as more teams are adopting remote work, as the quote unquote future of remote work becomes the present. So I thought it'd be great. Let's start really quickly with just a little introduction. I've kind of introduced myself. I'm here in Valencia, Spain, and we are. I'm part of Doist, which is a fully remote team spread across 35 different countries, about 100 different people, and coming from all different time zones. So we are all about remote work here, and we're the producers of Todoist and Twist. This is the Twist Future of Work series. So we are really honing in on asynchronous communication and the future of work. And that is what Twist is here to support. So just like the people over at Oyster, where you guys are also all about the future of work, tell us a little bit about you, Rhys, and what you guys are doing at Oyster.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Rhys Black. I'm head of remote at Oyster. Let me just quickly explain what Oyster does first. So we are an HR platform specifically for distributed teams. So what we do is we make it really simple and easy for companies to hire people as full-time payrolled employees as well as contractors anywhere in the world. So you can get access to the best talent in the world, not necessarily just the best talent in a particular geographic region. And we deal with everything from payroll to compliance to benefits and everything in between. So my role at Oyster, head of remote, I span a few different areas in the company. I kind of like to think of my team as somewhat of a glue between other parts of the organization. So the areas that we tie together is operations, people, and marketing. So on the operations side of things, it's really around the work that needs to be done differently or I guess to be emphasized because we're a distributed team. So there's a lot of work there around building autonomy for teams and individuals and visibility for teams and individuals so that they can work well across time zones and work asynchronously. So there's a whole load of work with knowledge management, project management, sort of defining ways of communicating and collaborating in that space. Also trying to be as data driven as possible in this area, which can be somewhat more qualitative than quantitative. And then on the people side of things, it's the employee experience that creates. So there is lots of great things about remote work and being a distributed team, but there are quite a lot of challenges too, right? So we want to optimize for the really good things and mitigate or minimize for those challenges. And really, those two areas, the operations and the people side of things, that culminates in our culture. So really the predictability and repeatability and the way that we do things as a distributed team and how that makes us feel. So that's that. And then partly because of the company that we are, we want to communicate a lot of this stuff externally. We want to be a source of inspiration and knowledge for our customers and anyone else that wants to listen to us. So I work quite a lot with our marketing team to do that too.
Yeah, you guys do a fantastic job of that as well. Your whole team's very active in the social world, and the marketing team's putting together great content. And I think that's why this is such an awesome collaboration here between Doist and Oyster, because we both just genuinely care about pushing forward the quote unquote future of work, right? Like we want people to have access to this distributed workflows. We want them to have the best practices that we're cultivating every single day and working hard at and testing. So it's important to both of our organizations to push that movement forward. And that's why we're here. That's why our roles exist to a large degree. And it's a lot of fun. It's great to kind of like pay it forward in that way, because I think we both teams, and I know in your previous experience, my previous experience, like you have some growing pains. We've learned a lot and taken our lumps along the way, I believe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lots of work to do.
Still optimizing. Well, when we dive into what Oyster does in particular, what do you think has changed in terms of HR as teams have started to adopt more of a distributed model? And I guess like setting the backstage a little bit. I mean, when you think about going from everybody working in office and pre-pandemic, and even let's go a couple years ahead of that, remote was starting to ramp up before the pandemic. It just got accelerated super fast. But all of a sudden, we've arrived to this point where there are a lot of teams around the world saying, "Oh, I need to figure out remote now." And it's not just how do we do Zoom calls and how do we send, communication back and forth, but it's things like how do we hire and fire and pay. And so what has changed, and I guess as part of that, like what is Oyster doing to solve those pain points?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big thing. I think if I was just to start with like a strap line for this whole thing, I would say that culture has become a non-negotiable, I guess you could say, and culture has been thrust into the spotlight. So if we were to talk about specifically people ops teams, HR teams, you could potentially make an argument that these teams have been undervalued to some degree for sort of historically, and have been, I guess, thought of as more of an administrative function, more of a supporting function for other parts of the business, and have not really been able to step forward into that spotlight, into, I guess, the culture area. With the pandemic and with everything else, there has already been that progress moving forward, right? We had this term HR, which has been around for a very long time, but there has been this progress towards a modern people operations function, right? To be this more holistic function, to be thought of as more of like a competitive advantage, like thinking of your people as just as important as your product and everything else that your company offers. So that was happening already. And then, of course, pandemic hit, we accelerated that by 10x. So now we're at a stage where these teams that were already making this transition, various stages from being the more traditional HR to being perceived and getting the agency to be a modern people ops team, have now also been tasked with being almost like a playmaker, a change agent within their own organizations, right? So pandemic happened, company decided to go fully remote or decided to go hybrid, and all of this, like the whole sphere of responsibilities around that, largely in most companies has sat with their people ops team. So great opportunity, but very, very, very big responsibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important to point out that a lot of people see remote and culture as on two different ends of the spectrum, as far as can you have culture with a remote organization? This gets challenged a lot, maybe as like the big downside. You can't, you'll see some article that some CEO's written, you can't build team camaraderie in a remote organization, as if they really cared about the culture and the team camaraderie beforehand. And it's always a little bit funny, but it is truly about the people and about for the organizations doing this correctly. It is looking at your people as the greatest asset that you have. So like in terms of specifically how is Oyster serving the needs of organizations that are moving to remote? And in terms of like if someone doesn't know what Oyster does, how do you explain them to them? What's the elevator pitch on here's how Oyster serves the distributed team of today?
Yeah. So there is the core problem, but then I think there is a much larger problem space around it that we are tackling. So as I mentioned before, the basic situation, let's say a company will come to us, and the situation that most of the time they'll be in is that they ran an interview process, they have come across a candidate in another country that they absolutely love, they're dying to get them into their team, and they're confronted by the realities of, wait, like how do we actually make this happen? How do we employ this person legally? How do we make them give them an equitable package relative to the rest of the company, and not fall foul to any regulations. So that's usually when someone will come to us and they'll be like, we have this person or this team that we want to bring on board. So that is the core of this problem, right? Is how to employ them properly under the right labor laws for that particular country, give them the right benefits, pay the right taxes, and deal with all of the complexity around that. And then I guess clicking out one ring from that, you start to then get to things like the larger compensation elements, like benefits, healthcare, equity, these sorts of things, as well as, I guess you could say, learning and development, and in that space. Like you can, in some ways, you can think of us as like an outsourced HR concierge in a lot of ways that will deal with not just the payment compliance points, but that bigger space around it. But the term we use a lot of the time is talent enablement. So those two words are important for different reasons. First one is we're talking about the talent, not the company. So we sort of pride ourselves on being talent centric and being focused on the employee, because really that's what aligns with our social mission the most, right? Our mission is to get people access to high quality jobs no matter where they are in the world, so they don't need to move and get separated from family and community, or have a lackluster career maybe where they live. So we focus on the talent. And then the other part is that enablement, right? What needs to be done to enable that person along with their company to have an amazing sort of working relationship with that. So I guess from the small core problem all the way out to that. And that's why we run, for example, things like Oyster Academy. So Oyster Academy is our training program where we have multiple training programs underneath Oyster Academy. One is for general remote workers that want to understand the skills and knowledge and mindset that they need to have to be a great remote worker alongside whatever their core competency is, as well as that we also have a course for people ops managers, so to actually help them be that playmaker, that change maker in their organization. So there's a big space when you say enablement around that.
It's a massive space. I mean, it's quite, like, geographically even speaking, like, you guys are doing this for people around the world and enabling people to acquire talent from around the world, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I lose track on where the countries we cover at this point. I know we're well over 100 countries in terms of where we're employing, and our customers are all spread around too, but there's basically no limits to it.
Yeah, it's truly global. You guys are like a distributed global team serving the needs of global customers. It's a pretty cool little intersection you're working in.
Yeah, we are very meta in that regard.
It is. It's very interesting to think about not just the challenges that you're helping solve, but also the opportunities presented by remote work. And I know you guys see that your CEO's story is very interesting. I know a bit about your personal story because we're friends from past conversations. But when you look at your customers, when you talk to the people you guys are serving, what kind of opportunities are you seeing the quote unquote future of work, to keep using that term? Like, what are you guys seeing presented to these people, and how is it changing the opportunities that are presented to the world?
Yeah, so I mean, if we start and we sort of dig a bit deeper into what I was saying about the employees, so our ethos is that talented people are spread around the world, but unfortunately access to high quality jobs is not, right? That is not, in the current day and age, that is not something that is readily available. And of course, that's what we want to change, right? It's a sad fact that if you live in a handful of cities around the world, you get access to high quality, high paying, high growth jobs than if you live basically anywhere else in the world. It's incredibly, incredibly focused in a handful of places. So we don't think that's fair, right? We think just depending on where you're born shouldn't dictate that. And we also think for companies as well, right? That there is a huge demand for talent, particularly in our sweet spot, or what is our sweet spot right now in tech companies, to the point that a very, very large number of roles go unfilled. So we see it every day, right? If companies can get access to talented people elsewhere in the world, they want it, right? And it's a massive benefit for them. It's very exciting to see our customers it's a funny thing. So there's a lot of mindset change in this, both on the employee side and on the employer side. But specifically on the employer side, it's very exciting to see that moment where a company goes, okay, well, the guardrails have just come off. Shall we take a look at Brazil? Like having that like mind shift and going, well, Brazil's a pretty big country. We are a US company, so it's a pretty good time zone. Maybe we don't need to go looking in Japan immediately because we're maybe not ready for that. But let's take a look at Brazil. And then they go there and they find out that, there's 20,000 Node.js developers they can hire, and they're absolutely doing backflips because they're so excited. So for that mind shift to change, and then for that to proliferate, like that's what we're aiming for.
It's amazing. I love that. Like I've heard people say before, like something along the lines of, we don't actually even need hire from anywhere. Like at Doist, for instance, we'll hire somebody from anywhere. We don't put like locations on our job descriptions. But when you see criticisms of places where they're like, oh, it only within one time zone or something, you think like, look how far we've come. It used to be like only within my postal code or zip code, only within 20 miles or 20 kilometers or something. And now we're talking about entire time zones, continents, and the whole world. So it's moved very rapidly, very quickly.
Yeah. Can I just mention one thing on that point? So yeah, as much as we are obviously evangelists for remote work and things, like I do agree that companies shouldn't just go like hell for leather and try and find someone. If you're an American company, hire someone in Indonesia when you have no process or no capacity to make that work, like work up to it. But yeah, the other thing as well, right, is that north-south alignment of jobs has not really been very common, right? I mean, you can go into the history of like agricultural economies and everything, why there's an east-west because of climate zones and things, but that's historically how it's been. And I think that has a hangover in our mentality that you have to look east and west of you. Like you could look north or south of you too. So yeah. You might not necessarily even need to go more than one time zone away, because there might be millions of people north and south of you that are highly talented that you can work with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that's overlooked for some reason or another. I 100% think you're correct. Like we tend to go east and west and believe that, that's where the talent lies if we're going to go remote. And we don't necessarily have to go that way. I also think like we don't have to flip the switch from one to the other. You don't have to go from all office to all remote and try to just nail that completely. You can take steps towards that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all or nothing. I think one of the underlying principles is that we both talk about a lot is like adopting asynchronous communication practices, and that can be one of those first steps. If you're going to hire somebody in Indonesia all of a sudden, then you should probably have some form of asynchronous communication practices in place already. And if you haven't worked up to that, then like, yeah, let's maybe start with something a little closer to home.
Yep, exactly.
This has been a really nice, quick overview of Oyster, what you guys do, the problems you're trying to solve, the marketplace that you work in, and that's what we wanted to get out to our customers. So thank you for providing the background and a little bit more about what you're doing personally and what the company's doing on a more macro level. I wonder if we can close really quickly with just a bit of advice. Like, what kind of advice are you giving to the prototypical customer that comes to you about really drilling in deep on HR, hiring, bringing people on? People ops can be the broader term, but bringing people on board, hiring in different countries. What is sort of the underlying advice that you're giving to customers on a pretty regular basis?
I guess it does follow on from some of the points you just mentioned, right? Like the world has moved incredibly fast over the last 2 years, year and a half. It doesn't need to continue like that in the way that you run your business, right? There's been a lot of reacting to the world over the last year and a half. So opportunities have arisen from that, and you should, take advantage of those, but you should also do it in a sort of considered way. So we do tell our customers, look, if you're thinking about talent acquisition and hiring elsewhere, start small, start in the Yeah, with talent acquisition, start small. And then I think the other thing as well is also, as I said, the operational capacity internally to allow that to succeed. You probably want to pick your battles and where you roll it out through the company, right? It doesn't need to be a whole company shift in terms of how you do that. Maybe you want to roll out some of these ways of doing things in a particular team first, incubate it there, and then spread. Whether that be maybe the team that you're planning on growing fastest, because then you have that compounding effect of the new blood coming into the company is doing things in this way. Or even just in the teams that are most excited about this, right? There might be certain people that are particularly on board and particularly interested in making this work.
Perfect. Awesome way to wrap this up. Thank you, Rhys. Tell us real quick, where can people learn more about Oyster and any other last thoughts that you have? But this was perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah. So you can find us on all the standard social media accounts or our LinkedIn, Oyster HR, as well as Twitter. And then our website is www.oysterhr.com.
Perfect. We will link to that as well, obviously, in the article. Thanks a lot, Rhys. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Chase.